Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm Rudolf Lüther from Germany. I have been invited to give a talk about images. I call it Using Images. And my question is, do images describe or avoid reality? The question in this title has a specific importance in the context of our culture today, because this culture seems to be increasingly determined by images, virtual worlds, and fictions. With these new conditions, a completely new danger appears to be emerging, the danger of a structural loss of reality, for example, in the context of computer game addiction. From my own philosophical point of view, which is a strictly Kantian one, the seductiveness of human beings by fictions and fictitious worlds can be explained quite easily, because according to Kant, we always live in the world of our imaginations. Kant calls this the things as appearances or phenomena, perceived things. And these have a complicated relationship to the so-called reality, which Kant calls the world of things in themselves, or noumena. We do not live in the world of things in themselves or of objective facts, but rather in the world of our ideas about things and about facts. The situation is made even more complicated by the fact that these images of things and facts are among the things and facts, and their relationship to the so-called actual things and facts is also complicated. When the so-called reality seems to consist more and more of images, and this seems to be the case in our actual cultural situation, this situation becomes confusing. We can talk about a new complexity. In my paper, I'm going to defend the thesis that, in a well-defined sense, we have always lived in unreal realities, and more in those unreal realities than in the so-called actual reality. The present situation is not completely new in this respect. Only the importance of unreal realities has increased. In order to make this strange doctrine plausible, before all talk about illusionary worlds, illusionary realities, virtual world, and so on, it must first be clarified what we mean when we speak of the actual reality. Furthermore, it must be clear what is meant by the formulation that a reality is not real, that it deceives us, lies, pretends something. In this context, I will also claim that deception is not such a bad thing. I can now draw the most important conclusion from these very general and abstract arguments. In an allusion to a famous Kantian thought, namely that man is, and I quote, a citizen of two worlds, this conclusion can be formulated as follows. Man is a citizen of many worlds because because he inevitably lives in many realities at the same time. One of his essential intellectual achievements is to keep these many realities apart from each other. This task is more difficult to accomplish under the conditions of postmodern image and media overload than in the times of Kant's own life. But it is not impossible. The philosopher does not have the same task as a media educator, but at least he can formulate some principles in this context which should guide a healthy and fruitful approach to the unreal realities in the postmodern flood of images and media. I start with the following principle. We need to remain in permanent contact with a directly sensually given reality, what we call the actual reality, when we at the same time let ourselves into the various forms of unreal realities. Metaphorically speaking, it is good to walk around in these other worlds, but we must always avoid to try and escape into these worlds. So the difference here is between walking and trying to escape. But how do we know the difference between walking and escaping in this context? My suggestions in this area are pragmatic. Walks in realities are not directly. Sorry, I must start again. Walks in realities that are not directly central invigorate the mind and should therefore be sought as an enrichment of our experiences. I have to explain this. If we go away from our centrally given reality into other realities, this is an invigoration of ourselves. It inspires us to do this. Walks differ from escapes by the following characteristics. So, what I say is, it is good to walk around in unreal realities because this is an inspiration, but we must avoid losing the contact to the um, real realities or the actual realities. That is, we must remain walkers and not try to escape from reality. And how do we know whether we are in the right mood? Well, I have four suggestions in this respect. Walks differ from escapes by the following characteristics. First, they are for pleasure and enrichment only, not for overcoming frustration and forgetting. Second, they serve the purpose of contemplative self discovery, not merely the distracting loss of ourselves. Thirdly, they remain aware of their character as taking a holiday from everyday reality and do not succumb to the danger of confusing these other worlds with that of everyday life. And fourth and finally, they do not therefore take the place of everyday realities or actual realities. They should always consume much less time than um, our presence in everyday reality. And this is the most important indicator. If we spend very, very much time in those unreal realities, the unreal realities cannot fulfill the purpose of giving us the chance to walk around in an alternative reality, but they take the place of this reality. And this is an indicator that we are on the wrong path. There are uh, at least two famous figures from the literary tradition, namely Madame Bovary and Don Quixote, who um, became victims of a wrong concept of the use of images and alternative worlds. They did not walk around in their unreal realities, they fled into them. This is also reflected in the proportion of reading in their respective overall lives. They sort of fled into the worlds of fictions, and these worlds took the place of their actual reality, and that destroyed their ability to live a normal and successful human life. However, this does not make the fictional worlds per se questionable, but only the wrong way of dealing with them aesthetically and morally. It is as follows. Uh, all fictitious worlds, all images, all metaphors do help us to better understand the world by invigorating our fantasy and our view of the world. But they destroy us, they destroy our healthy relation to uh, reality when they become too important. And they become too important when we forget the difference between walking around in these worlds and fleeing into them, escaping into them. So I come to my conclusion. My conclusion from these considerations is therefore unreal realities, metaphors, images, fictitious worlds are sources of possible cultural enrichment, and they are important in this function. We should cultivate them, but we must learn to use them in the right way. And my suspicion is that in our present day culture there is a certain seduction to misread the function of these alternative worlds. We should walk in these worlds, but we must never flee into them. And this is all that I have to say in this context, and I hope you find it interesting enough. Thank you very much for your interest.